A number of years ago, I got a call from the librarian's office. A businessman from South Korea wanted a tour. We have 2 acres of maps, 5.5 million maps. And since I knew he was from Korea, I took him back to the Korean set area and just opened a drawer, just a random drawer, opened it up, and I saw maps there that I had not seen before, which often happens in a collection that large. And these included a map of Pyongyang, North Korea. I pulled one of them out and I gave it to him. And there was just a long pause. He didn't say anything. And then he finally said, and people do this with maps, he finally pointed to it. He said, "That's where I was born." And, you know, out of 5.5 million maps, what are the chances of that? And several weeks later, I received a letter from him, and he thanked me for the tour. And then he apologized. He said, "I'm so sorry that I couldn't respond immediately when you showed it to me. But I was just overpowered with emotion." And when you look at art or paintings, you stand back and want to get an impression of the overall view. But when you look at a map, it almost pulls you in because you have that relationship that goes back for a long time.
Maps, which was really at the center as a theme of this symposium, is something that fascinates a great deal of people.
What can we do with maps? Well, most of the people still think that maps can be used just for geography. Maps can especially nowadays, can be used to trace and understand the global circulation of knowledge and people.
One of the things we're trying to do at the Ricci Institute is we're trying to bring together these two traditions. The Western tradition of community of learning and the Chinese tradition of self-cultivation, the pursuit of knowledge and harmony. And I think that is something that is reflected in our name. It's the Ricci Institute for Chinese Western Cultural History, of encounters between East and West. And so I think it has to do with finding a place where we can both meet. So as we looked at the maps that Ricci and Fabrice made for two different emperors, the Wanli Emperor and the Kangxi Emperor, what we discovered is that this was a hybrid project. It was the Chinese bringing their knowledge of the world and the Europeans bringing their own knowledge and navigational skills and putting those things together. And we thought that would be a wonderful snapshot of how people interacted, how they exchanged knowledge, and how they befriended each other.
Between the common part of life and the difference in our lives will bring people together from different perspectives. And that's, and oftentimes in research, and one of the things that the Ricci Institute has been trying to promote is to bring both aspects together and then particularly paying attention to the voices that have not been heard. And that's what we're trying to do. So speaking of, Verbiest's map and the impact on the Chinese scholars and Chinese people, curiosity leads to, more, discovery, and probably more discovery, more curiosity, and then find opportunity to understand more.
We were both equally curious and fascinated by Matteo Ricci's map, the depiction of space, and the music and possible narratives that could breathe life into his journey. This project creates an interdisciplinary performance that tells a different story than that accomplished by music, words, or images alone. This unique combination of media uses the ephemeral nature of sound to open doors to our audience's minds and hearts in a way that speaks to the complexity of Ricci's experience and to the complexity of the relationships that often result with cultural exchange.
Ricci is great to think with. You don't have to be necessarily interested in the history of the Jesuits or the history of Christianity in China to find him fascinating, because he's the outsider in a sense that we all are who come to study China from the outside. He's the outsider who comes in, he learns the language, he learns the culture, and so he then becomes an observer. You follow his observations as a way of perhaps filtering and thinking about your own observations.
So you use maps as lens through which you detect or you try to understand connections between several people in the world.
Regional maps tend to be more functional. They could be administrative for tax or for topography. They could be military-related uses. World maps are different in that you can't fit everything on them, but what you fit on there is your cosmology, your view of the world and the universe, how the world fits, how the continents and how the people on them live. So the world maps that were done both in Europe and in China have all kinds of unusual details. They have the products and produce of different countries, what the people look like, if they wear strange clothes, the animals and insects and animal life that live there.
Let me start from a conversation I had in the fall of 1989. This is with an elder Chinese scholar, somebody I deeply respected. And he and I were having a meal of jiaozhis, so these little dumplings. I remember this very clearly. And I said to him, as an outsider, the culture remains closed to me. I remain an outsider. And of what point is it for me to spend my life working on something from which I am ultimately excluded? And he said, you've got that completely backwards. He said, think of Chinese culture as a room. He said, and think of me as someone who is inside that room, who sees every inch of the walls, the ceiling, and the floor, knows everything, that can see everything. You're the outsider, you're standing outside, you don't see anything of what I'm seeing. There's a window, all you can do is look in. But he said, all I can do is look out. I can tell you what's inside the room, but I have no idea where the room is. You're outside the room looking in the window, and you can tell me where we are. And that's why you have to continue what you do. It's very important.
If you get in contact with people from the 17th century, for instance, it helps you to understand yourself in the 21st century. So you have to make connections horizontally in this time, but also vertically. So at earlier times.
The organizers of the conference have actually recognized this link between cartography and cultural thinking and the way we look at ourselves. This story about how NASA has affected the way we understand the Earth and see ourselves goes back to 1960, when we sent the first satellite up with a television camera on it that took pictures of the Earth. When we got those first images of the Earth, it's floating in this vast, empty desert of space with nothing. In some ways, it's a very scary picture because it shows how fragile and how precarious our situation really is, and therefore, how much we really need to take care of the Earth.
And so when you see these images of the Earth from outer space, especially when they do the time-lapse photography, it's fascinating because when you look at it, of course you don't see the lines of latitude and longitude, right? They're not there. You see no national boundaries, which we tend to argue about on maps. It's just this organic whole, and when you can see the seasons change over the course of the year, you know, over the course of 15 seconds or whatever it is, it's almost like the Earth is breathing. So it's a little bit like now we have an opportunity again to understand our Earth, the globe, in a different way, and to put back into our consciousness some of the things that came off the map.
When I came to work at NASA, people were just starting to realize how complex the Earth system really is, and that the subsystems of the Earth, the oceans, the land, the atmosphere, and even life, were all interacting with one another. And this whole idea of Earth system science was born, and NASA, right when I went to work for NASA, had developed a program to build satellites to study all of those pieces and do it simultaneously so that we could see how they interact with one another.
As technology develops, we can take people to parts of the planet that they might never actually visit, you know, the top of Mount Everest, or to Antarctica, or to the Amazonian rainforest, and explore those places in virtual reality and really experience what it's like to be in those places. And increasingly to do that collaboratively, do that, you know, with a group in a classroom or with your friends. And that's, I think, a fantastic experience for people. You know, it's an emotional experience.
What have impacted people and what will continue impacting people is the friendship, that idea of friendship. And that's what Matteo Ricci started. He tried very hard to promote that particular understanding, what that means. So if there's one, key component in our work is to promote the cross-cultural understanding through education, research, but above and beyond is friendship.